Synthetic vitamins are made from coal tar. They're man-made. You can see a picture over here of a guy spreading coal tar on the asphalt. That's the base for these synthetic vitamins. This is where they're made from. We manipulate the carbon structures, put them in the same spots that vitamins would appear in, but this is their base. They're just isolated chemicals. They lack the transporters, the minerals, the other vitamins, the other cofactors necessary for the body to recognize them and utilize them. In fact, they can't work by themselves. They're just naked chemicals, so they will deplete the body of raw materials over time. You can feel better initially because your body will pull calcium or zinc or any of the micronutrients in order for that vitamin to be active. But over time, as it pulls more and more of those out, you will start to feel the effects of that, and they can do harm. Many of them are made by pharmaceuticals. 95% of the vitamins that are sold out there as of 2012 contain synthetic vitamins. When we test them, they have lower bioavailability, which means that they're not absorbed by the body. The body doesn't prefer them, and it has a hard time recognizing and utilizing them. They can actually become toxic at high levels, especially the synthetic fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamins A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K can actually build up in the liver and the adipose tissue, your fat cells, and cause toxicity. They look identical. Again, the carbon structures are in the same spot, but they don't act identically in the body. My analogy is looking in the mirror. Most everyone has looked in the mirror and seen your image, and they would say, yes, that's identical. You see your right arm reflected in the mirror, then your body, and then your left arm. But if you were to actually walk into the image and become the image, notice where your right arm goes to. It goes to the other side, doesn't it? So while the carbons are in the same spot, the geometry is different, and that difference is critical in the body. When we bake these synthetic vitamins, you can see 8 of them here numbered on the left, and then you can see the vitamins on the pan. This is how they come out of the container. And then on the far right are what they look like after you bake them for at 350 degrees for 10 or 15 minutes. You can see that the synthetic vitamin will revert back to its petroleum distillate state. So black will ooze out of these pills. Depending on the amount of vitamin in there, different amounts of blackness will be shown. The top one, number 1, has a little bit of synthetic vitamin. The most of it is inorganic rock, and so the rock doesn't turn black. So it doesn't mean it's healthier, it just means it has very little vitamin in it. But as you get more and more synthetic vitamin, you see that the blackness goes deeper and deeper. Now, 2 of those, number 6 and number 8, don't show any black at all. That's because those are 2 examples of natural plant-based vitamins. They just kind of turn a golden brown. There's no black in them. And that's a difference between synthetic and natural vitamins. If you look at number 7, you might be amazed. It's just an entire pool of coal tar. This is actually the number 1 doctor-recommended vitamin supplement for children. And this is what it turns into. Natural vitamins actually come in a food matrix. They come with a lot of other things. They come with other vitamins, other minerals, enzymes, flavonoids, antioxidants, phytosterols, carotenoids, yada, yada, yada. Just a lot of other nutrient comes with it. And it's those other micronutrients that allow the body to recognize it and utilize it appropriately. You only have to be 10% natural to make the marketing claim, which is kind of amazing. That's a pretty low bar. The way they get around that is because petroleum and limestone come from nature. They're in the ground. And so you can call them natural, but it's not natural to eat them. And that's the whole point. People assume that natural means plant-sourced, but that's not necessarily true. You have to look on the back of your container. For example, vitamin C, if it's natural, it will have parentheses after it states vitamin C, and you'll see something about a plant, citrus, rose hips, acerola berries, something that indicates the plant source. If there are no parentheses, then it just says vitamin C, it's synthetic. If it says ascorbic acid, it's synthetic. If it says vitamin C parentheses ascorbic acid, it's synthetic. So you have to be careful with that. Natural vitamins have much higher bioavailability. The body prefers them, absorbs them better. They're not toxic at high levels. They're essential for human physiology. You have to have them in your body every day. They catalyze enzymatic reactions every day of your life. But they're expensive to extract from plants, so that's why you don't see them very often. Plants they don't suck up anywhere near the minimum RDA levels that are required for human consumption. So you have to mix them around in order to get a standard amount of vitamin out of them. So that's very manpower intensive to go to all that work. It's a lot cheaper to just add a petrochemical here, another petrochemical here, and follow the formula, and out comes a standard amount each and every time. Much cheaper. Many companies claim that their vitamins come from plant sources, but you have to look carefully because while they come from natural sources, you have to flash pasteurize them, which kills anything that might be bad, but it also sterilizes what is good. Whenever you heat things like that, you destroy the nutritional value, you sterilize it. And so what happens when they go through that process is at the end, before they package it, there's very little nutrient material left in that container. So what they do is they will add synthetic vitamins to raise the numbers and make it look better. So be careful. And if they do that kind of thing, synthetic vitamins are not good for you. There are studies that have shown dramatic harm to people. And so the difference of knowing what is natural and what is synthetic is important. These are from the 1990s when pharmaceuticals actually paid to have these studies done because the American Medical Association had said people cannot get enough nutrient. You can't get your nutrient needs from food anymore. And so you need to supplement. And so the pharmaceuticals said, well, we can build these identical vitamins. They're cheap when we build them out of petrochemicals. And since they're identical, they should have the same benefit as natural vitamins. And we can sell them and we'll have a win-win situation. But when they administered them to 18,000 smokers and asbestos workers, they actually had to halt the study before it was completed because when the raw data came in, they showed they had increased death from lung cancer, 46%. They increased death from cardiovascular disease, 26%. So those studies were halted. They couldn't go on with them. Another study published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1995 involved the supplementation of synthetic forms of vitamin A to 22,000 pregnant women. But again, they had to stop that study because they increased birth defects 400%. You cannot hurt people at those kinds of levels in the name of science and continue. So they halted the studies. They had no idea what had gone wrong. These were supposedly identical vitamins. But it's not just these two cases. In 2007, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, was a meta-analysis of 47 clinical trials where they had supplemented with synthetic forms of vitamin A, vitamin E, beta-carotene, and all through those studies, they showed that they had increased the mortality risk. It was more people died taking these vitamins than the placebo group who did not take them at all. So they were doing harm to people. There's a little caveat at the very end of these studies, 2 sentences that says, these findings don't apply to natural vitamins. That's because natural vitamins don't hurt you. But that information had a hard time getting out. And so the synthetic forms, knowing which is synthetic, which is natural, is vitally important for your health because the synthetic ones are sold today on the market. So I've got some listed here. We've built a consumer awareness guide that has more of these details, but I'll hit vitamin A here at the top. It's also known as retinol. If it's living or natural, it will say it comes from something living or natural. Fish oils, liver, vegetables, something organic. If it's synthetic, there will be no source, no parentheses given. It'll just say retinol or vitamin A. If it has acetate or palmitate along with the name, then for sure it's synthetic. Vitamin C, we've already mentioned where it comes naturally versus synthetic. One note on vitamin C, though, at the bottom, ascorbic acid is not vitamin C. Ascorbic acid is just 5% of the molecule. It's 5% of the vitamin C complex. It's the outer antioxidant wrapper that protects the other 95% of the vitamin. You're missing rutin, bioflavonoids, factor K, factor J, factor P, tyrosinase, ascorbinogen. There are several components that go into vitamin C. I call it fake vitamin C when I see it as ascorbic acid, and 90% of that fake vitamin C is actually produced by a drug manufacturer, and they use a process involving cornstarch and sulfuric acid. Now, all the other companies, pharmaceutical companies and other companies who bring this to market, they purchase it from this source, and they just rebrand it into their particular vitamin C. But it all comes from there. Now, an interesting thing with scurvy, when the discoverer of this vitamin C complex looked at it, he identified what it was that cured scurvy, if you had it, and what prevented you from getting it in the first place. But he also did some testing with ascorbic acid, and what he found was while vitamin C complex cures and prevents scurvy, ascorbic acid does not. It's just an antioxidant. It's not the whole vitamin. It's just 5%. So when people purchase this, though, their thinking is when they see vitamin C, they think they're getting the same thing that you get from eating an orange, and you're not. It's much different than the natural form. Vitamin E, if it's natural, it'll come from wheat germ oil or mixed tocopherols. D-alpha tocopherol is the most common way that you see it. The synthetic form will usually be listed as DL-alpha tocopherol. One letter different. It might have an acetate or a succinate too, but the DL-alpha tocopherol, what is going on with this D and L? D actually stands for the Latin root word dextro, which means right. Levo is L for left. And when you pass polarized light through a natural vitamin E, the light will always bend to the right. And so it's called D for dextro, alpha tocopherol. The identical synthetic vitamin, when you pass polarized light through it, half of the light bends to the right and half bends to the left. Doesn't sound like a big deal, except that when we test it in the body says it's a big deal, and it does harm to you gravely. So that geometry, again, very important to the body. Beta-carotene is the orangey stuff that you see in carrots, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. Kale is also a good source of beta-carotene. Typically, you'll not see any source given. There will be no parentheses. That's because about 90% of the beta-carotene sold on the market is synthetic. It's actually derived from benzene, which comes from acetylene gas. Minerals are not synthetics, they're called inorganics. That means they're not living, they're rocks. And we mine them and we bring them to market as a mineral supplement. They're cheap when we do that, but the bioavailability, the absorption rate of eating a rock and trying to suck the mineral out of that rock is not very good. A plant-based mineral is much better. It's tens of times greater. A plant is designed to take rocks. It coats it with a food matrix. You eat the plant, and that bioavailability is tens of times greater. Humans just don't do a good job of eating rock. You're not built to eat rock. Plants do. If you have rocks for supplements, then they will typically end with ATE or IDE. I've got 16 of them listed so that when you go home you can look and compare what you're taking with this consumer awareness guide. I want to mention inorganic calcium supplements because a lot of women in Western countries are aware that the recommendations are to supplement calcium because the bone health of women in these countries is very, very poor. And so calcium citrate and calcium carbonate are the two primary delivery systems. Notice the ATE on the ends of those. Calcium carbonate, by the way, is just chalk, the same kind of chalk that you use to write on a blackboard. But we grind it up and put in the supplement. Normally they come at 1,200 milligrams. That's because only 5 to 7% of that calcium is ever absorbed in your body. You just don't do a good job sucking calcium from a rock. That equates to about 60 milligrams. So you think you're getting 1,200, you're only getting 60 milligrams of calcium in your blood, in your body, in your urine. Plant-based calcium, dark leafy greens like kale and spinach are much better sources. Don't get the calcium from milk. If you Google milk myth on the internet, you'll see that the nations consuming the most milk also have the highest bone health concerns. So be careful. You can learn why that is there on the internet. This is a study by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, just came out in 2013, published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. They looked at supplementation across the board up to levels of 1,000 milligrams of calcium and 400 milligrams of vitamin D. And what they found was very surprising. What they discovered was that that supplementation did nothing to prevent bone fractures. Nothing. In fact, it actually did harm. It increased kidney stones 17%, and it was implicated in heart disease. Again, calcification, what is that? Well, the British Medical Journal published a study in 2012 that showed that calcium supplementation doubles the risk of heart disease. Calcification and hardening of the arteries, all of these processes go on. Sometimes the thinking is more is better, but when you put too much into the body, other things go wrong. Now, a little note in the study, they found that calcium in food doesn't seem to have the same problems as this inorganic calcium. So that was a big difference in terms of what happens in terms of our supplementation. So be careful when you supplement vitamins and minerals.